Jeez, how many years ago did I tease this game? Trust me, it was not worth the wait. Jumper is a movie where Hayden Christensen tries to revive his career post-Revenge of the Sith. He plays David Rice, a man with the power to teleport anywhere on Earth, which he uses to rob banks and live a life of debauchery. One day, David discovers there's an entire race of people who can teleport called Jumpers, and another group, the Paladins, led by Samuel L. Jackson, who kill Jumpers for very stupid reasons.
Only God should have the power to be all places at all times.
Pop quiz, jackass. If God hates Jumpers, why does he keep making so many of them? Jumper starts out really good and then just turns to shit the longer it goes, beginning as cool wish fulfillment fantasy, taking an out-of-nowhere detour into a really stilted and awkward romance, then turning into every generic superhero story ever, playing the tropes completely straight with flat one-dimensional characters. They don't even touch the obvious parallels to real-life religion-fueled violence and persecution that were sitting right there with a big X on them, and it has a completely open ending that doesn't resolve crap, because between next Jumper and Push coming out in consecutive years, I guess that was just the style at the time. Jumper's action looks superb and the cast gives good performances, showing Hayden's problem was just bad luck picking bad movies, but past the hilarious subtext of Mace Windu finally getting to haul off and whoop Anakin's ass, the movie just doesn't have anything going for it besides eye candy. But Fox wanted a franchise, so spin-off prequel novel and video game tie-in following Jamie Bell's character, and here we are with Jumper, Griffin's story on the Wii. The game begins with a flashback to Griffin's parents being murdered by Paladins while looking for him before it cuts forward to a scene from the movie. David is breaking into a coliseum to impress his girlfriend, Paladins ambush them, and Griffin intervenes because he's dedicated his life to hunting them. I'm torn on how much sense this intro makes if you haven't seen the movie. Go kill assholes is pretty self-explanatory. So, combat begins. You mash the A and B buttons to get a migraine. Every single attack that you launch has you warping around your opponent at complete random with the camera wildly jerking about to match. It didn't make me nauseous or anything personally, but it's still confusing and unpleasant to look at. I seriously cannot find any difference whatsoever between the light and heavy attacks. You mash buttons, people die, and that's kind of it. You have a block button. The few times I tried using it against bosses, nothing happened. Every fight I just mash buttons, and after some incomprehensible, barely controlled action, the fight ends. The combat may as well be one of those cartoon dust clouds from Looney Tunes where you see an arm or a leg poke out every now and then. So combat is a joke. But the big, crucial question, literally the only reason anybody would buy this game, how do they handle the Jumper's fantastical powers of teleportation? Hardly at all. You can teleport by holding down the C button, aiming the Wii Remote's cursor, and releasing C to jump instantaneously to your target, assuming of course that the game feels like it. It often takes several seconds before the cursor glows to indicate you can teleport, and because the cursor is so hard to see, you'll lose track of it and it'll get stuck from the Wii Remote pointing off screen all the friggin' time. But even if the warping worked correctly, every damn level is 95% made out of narrow, tight, featureless hallways with no terrain whatsoever. That teleportation power doesn't really do anything except cross a hall slightly faster or occasionally replace a proper jump button. I don't know how many games incorporate teleportation mechanics, but compared to Portal, or a more reasonable goalpost, the X-Men 3 licensed game, this is just embarrassing. Actually, not only are your teleportation powers thoroughly useless, but using them kinda breaks the game. Doors further into any given level won't open until you've killed all the enemies up to that point, except I've repeatedly found that if you warp down hallways to try and make the game end faster, it often screws up the game's triggers and progress marking, and the enemies that you need to kill won't spawn. So if you have the audacity to actually use your character's main powers the game is supposedly built around, you'll often be forced to backtrack through levels, usually more than once, until the damn game finally remembers to have all the mandatory enemies appear. That's just great. You know what else I always wanted from my superhero games besides getting punished for using your powers? How about cop murder? This first level, you're forced to butcher a crap load of good, honest cops who are only doing their job protecting a national monument from a blood-soaked, demented murderer with a knife. You know, Samuel L. Jackson's excuse for hunting Jumpers is that they all inevitably turn evil from the power. You're kinda proving his case and fueling further persecution, Griffin. Good job! You do eventually fight paladins, not that it matters. The only difference between them and the cop enemies is that paladins can shoot cables at you, so you have to spin the control stick for a few seconds. Whoopee. Yeah, in the movie, paladins use stun batons and tasers because electrocuting jumpers messes with their teleportation. I admit the clubs and grapples make for cool fight scenes in the movie, but you know what else might hamper a jumper's powers? Getting shot in the face! Really though, whether it's cops or paladins with special anti-jumper sparkly sticks, all the enemies fight the same. The only strategy involved is running away to recover health if things go pear-shaped. You do charge up super meters that allow Griffin to float a few inches up off the ground and fart a shockwave that maybe kills one enemy. Figure that one out. Also, eventually I stumble across a golden sword thing that I can swap out for my knife, so apparently the game has alternate weapons. I noticed literally no difference between the new weapon and what I was using, but I guess I'll keep it. This first level ends with a boss fight against a really muscular paladin dude. Mixing up weak and heavy attacks does nothing, he just decks you across the room. Blocking does nothing, he just decks you across the room. He's standing under a ton of wooden support beams that I thought maybe you have to screw with the environment to collapse the roof on his head. Near as I can tell, the only way to fight him is to run up, land a few hits, and then run away to recover health. A strategy the AI has zero answer for. The only downside to this plan is that you'll have to listen to him constantly babble the whole 4 lines they bothered to record for this dude.
Be the third jumper I killed today, huh? I think so. You want to be the third jumper I killed today, huh? I think so.
I have to admit, you're as boring as I remembered.
Griffin nabs a paladin lieutenant and takes him back to his lair to interrogate. Apparently he's hunting Roland, Samuel L. Jackson's character, and he has a flashback to 3 years ago when he encountered Roland in Nepal. Not sure why we're flashing back to it when Roland obviously survives, but wait a minute. Why does Griffin still have that golden sword I picked up in the last level if this is set 3 years before the intro?
You've created a time paradox. It's him! Spread out! You're not leaving here, Griffin.
Oh shit, the paradox is so bad it's warping the enemy's speech patterns! So Griffin is at a monastery that the paladins are infesting, and you have to beat up a crapload of evil monks and the same copy-pasted paladins again. And frankly, the monks are just reskins of the police officers, just using crossbows instead of guns. They seriously only have 2 enemy types across the entire game, just reskinned to match each level's environment. There's this one room here where you have to climb a crapload of stairs to catch up to Roland, only really able to use your teleportation powers to cross a few gaps in the stairs. There is absolutely zero in-universe reason Griffin couldn't just warp up to where Roland is right away. Griffin has a great line in the movie where he goes, "I like walking for change, makes me feel normal." I can't find that clip anywhere. Nobody posts clips of this damn movie. I ripped Fandango and CinemaSins and poof, well was dry. Yeah, Jamie Bell makes an impression in the movie for being the snarky friend and comic relief, but in this game they really only recorded about 3 quips that he parrots endlessly, and his favorite is,
You have a lot to learn. You have a lot to learn. You have a lot to learn.
well, you won't learn because you're dead, but you catch my drift. I died twice in this second level, once because the special move button just decided to stop working, so I sat in place mashing it confused, and once because Roland fights you in an electrical fence that kinda kills you instantly. And both times I learned that the game has maybe 1 or 2 checkpoints per level, so if you die you can expect to be sent back about 10 minutes or more. And when you actually fight Roland, you just have to run in circles to recover health because, well, Samuel L. Jackson's getting up there in age, you know, he ain't gonna catch you. Oh snap, Roland's got a double-sided stun baton now. Mace Windu's picking up tricks from Darth Maul. It does absolutely squat to make him any stronger, but I still admire the spirit. Griffin asks Roland about the paladins that killed his parents, only for them to abruptly show up. And despite the fact that a perfect dodge results in his parents' killer being tied up, Griffin just leaves rather than warp down and stab her. For some batshit reason, though, both this and the previous cutscene played with an endless, droning, loud static noise, like the lines were recorded in the middle of a swarm of bees.
Not bad, but not good enough.
Tell me you killed my parents and I'll make it quick.
I thought maybe our recording device was dying, but no. The recording of those cutscenes was so half-assed that there actually is a white noise buzzing sound in these two cutscenes, and game bugs and recording software can make it worse.
Paladins kill jumpers. I kill paladins. Class dismissed.
How do I get him off me?
Back in the present, because I guess they just had the one flashback that shed zero light on our current situation, Griffin steals the lieutenant's phone and hacks it to find the Paladins are robbing a science lab to steal some device. I just know they're stealing the portal machine that the Paladins just abruptly have out of nowhere at the movie's climax, because I guess it's not just actors they stole from Star Wars, they also took using the expanded universe to fill in plot holes. So yeah, more copy-pasted button mash fighting where now you're butchering innocent security guards who are only doing their jobs and trying to stop the exact same intruders that you are. Cool. There's a bitch of an area where you have to endlessly backtrack over the same 3 rooms over and over trying to get the game to spawn all the enemies so that you can proceed, and I had to do it multiple times because then you get ambushed by a turret with a machine gun and a surprise flamethrower that kills you in 1 hit. Past that, though, I'm kinda out of things to say. You just walk down normal hallways and try not to puke during the combat. There's nothing the hell else to this game! Can you imagine if they took a superhero like, I don't know, Iron Man, and made a video game, but instead of flying through big open environments fighting tanks and helicopters and big open battles where you can go nuts with tons of weapons, instead of the stuff you wanted to do, you were just slowly walking through tight hallways fighting endlessly cloned weak-ass normal soldiers. Oh wait, they did do that, didn't they? The camera is another persistent pain in your ass the entire game. It only vaguely follows you around as you navigate levels and engage in combat, and while you can move the camera with the Wiimote's D-pad, it's slow, clunky, and barely works. The game works on Mario 64 logic where the camera cannot phase through walls, and because this camera has never heard of zoom functions, most of the time you won't actually be able to move the camera to see what you're doing. This results in several infuriating combat sequences where some or all of the enemies are off-screen, which includes, pretty much all of the boss fights. You can recenter the camera behind you with the 1 button, which is really awkwardly out of the way on the controller, and this function is also incorporated with let's do our best to make the player puke vision. I also found a long sword and a billy club to use as weapons. I still can barely tell any difference in the combat, and since the end-level screens imply that you get stronger with a weapon the more you use it, there's no reason to ever switch from the short swords that you get at the start of the game. The boss of the lab is, I think, the same lady who killed Griffin's parents, only now she has a prosthetic arm that Griffin quips about giving her. Might have been nice to know the backstory and grudge behind that. You fight her by waiting until she gets the arm's grapple function stuck in a wall and then wailing on her. Seems like a real waste to make a robot arm and then put nothing inside it except a taser. I'd go for forearm cannons like the super battle droids. The arm's already copying Star Wars anyway. She tells you the Paladins just stole a machine that will let them reopen scars, which are portals that jumpers leave behind when they teleport, but only when it's convenient for the plot. Okay, the existence of jumpers is not common knowledge in the movie, and the lab isn't run by the Paladins because they're robbing it. So how does this completely normal lab have a machine that uses jumper powers? And then you're on a boat. Just, seriously, out of nowhere, not a word of explanation, you're on a boat now. I'm not doing the meme. The game tries to ramp up the difficulty by just swamping you with enemies, but I can still run away to recover health, so difficulty is still a foreign concept. Sometimes when you do a special move, Griffin warps his enemies somewhere to throw them off of a cliff, which is kinda cool, but pro tip, Griffin, don't tell David that you throw people down a volcano. The actor might still be a little touchy on that. Speaking of, I found a flamethrower! Huh, finally a cool weapon! I can't wait to see how this wrecks the enemies! Why am I surprised that the flamethrower just kinda farts weak punches at people? And again, this is only here to explain why Griffin has a flamethrower in the movie. He found it on a ship that he was wandering around for no reason. Truly, the movie is complete with this new lore behind it. And then you fight a guy with a sword, because shut up. And despite fighting him on a small level suspended over a bottomless pit, good cardio is still the key to killing this guy. Griffin just kind of goes home and calls it a day. Then the movie happens again and David leads the Paladins to Griffin's base. You fight Roland again, only shorter and easier. Roland leaves because of plot armor, and then Griffin just abruptly jumps to some random house in the middle of nowhere and you fight the sword guy again. I have no idea what just happened, and this doesn't even slightly line up with the movie where David fights Griffin to keep him from blowing up his girlfriend. But why bother? No one remembers this movie. I could say the final boss is wielding the Sword of Tengu, and more people will get that reference. Sword Guy is an annoying son of a bitch. He does basically nothing but slam his sword into the ground to create a shockwave that knocks off half your health. You fight him by landing a few hits, teleporting away, and then running back to him to land more hits. It's not a hard fight, it's just that you have to struggle with the controls a lot to make it work. Carefully keeping the Wiimote cursor on the screen so it doesn't get stuck, and wrestle constantly with the camera so you have some idea of where the boss actually is. So this game in a nutshell. The controls are a bigger threat to you than the actual enemies. You kill Sword Guy, and Griffin asks about another woman who was there with his parents, which goes nowhere because it's a reference to the film's cliffhanger ending. And the game just ends, with the villains barely having been inconvenienced, the main villain getting away because he's taken down in the movie, and our hero having accomplished basically nothing. So Griffin's story is the tale of how a comic relief side character killed some unimportant people and then went home. Yay. It only took me 1 hour and 50 minutes to finish this game, and that's with having to replay a few sections from cheap design and lousy checkpoints. If you manage to avoid dying, the game is probably the same length as the movie. They try to compel you to replay the game with collectibles in the levels like a shield, a microscope, I think, a little frog statue thing. They don't do anything, and you're not even told what they are. Why should I care? And the sad thing is, an hour 50 is not even close to my record for short Wii games. Griffin's story feels like Fox only decided at the last second to try and force Jumper to become a franchise, so by the time they commissioned a video game tie-in, the dev only had like a month to do it. You walk through halls mashing buttons, and that's it. It barely has levels, it barely has combat, they completely give up on even pretending to have a story, and it barely has voice acting. Apart from some decent comic book art in the cutscenes, this is barely a game! Although considering this game was published by Brash Entertainment, who are apparently notorious for screwing over and closing studios, making rushed half-baked games on whatever cheap licenses they could find, and may or may not be linked to Brash Games, the review site that didn't pay writers, altered review scores to ass-kiss the industry, and deleted the writing credits of anybody who quit their shitty company, maybe I've just taken my first step into a larger world. Star Wars reference!
You hold him back, or do you just suck?
What's a paladin?